Koga, the Lost Hand, our newest character who's been out for several weeks now. We may be in 1.4 now, but that doesn't mean we've forgotten about Zin's former apprentice. Unlike other characters who I talk about soon after their release, I've waited quite a bit to talk about Koga, and for good reason. Koga is unlike the characters we've been getting lately. While they may be very unique, not you, they lack something that we haven't seen in quite a long time and only a few characters really possess: a demand for skill. When it comes to both skill requirement and cap, Koga is right up there with the likes of Androxus and Eevee. Now, I'm not saying exactly as much, I'm saying he's in the same league. I still stand by Eevee having the overall highest skill requirement and cap in the game. Now, due to Koga being a more skill-based character, he takes longer to learn. So I took the time to learn him, and honestly, I'm still learning him. But what I'm learning is the smaller things and not the big concepts of the character. I think I have those down, and now that I do, I think it's time to pass it on to you guys. In this video, the spotlight is on Koga. We're going to talk about how much skill he takes, how good he is, how he's ran, and what his place in the meta is in detail. But keep in mind, this isn't a guide on how to play him, because again, there's still more to learn. A guide will come later after some more time is spent with him and I have completely mastered him. I'm going to give you the truth about Koga. You may have noticed that the community is very mixed on him. You see plenty of people saying he's overpowered, and you see plenty of people saying otherwise. Koga is honestly the closest character to balanced that they've released in a long time, with the last one being Ash. Now, I know some of you are already clicking away at your keyboards telling me about how wrong I am, and about how blatantly overpowered this character is. But hold on, I'm gonna explain everything. No, he is not overpowered. He's very strong in some areas, and he's pretty weak in others, but nothing about him is over the top in comparison to other flanks. When it comes to Koga, there are mainly two things that I've seen people finding OP. Those are his ultimate and his claws. And these two things are in reality the weakest parts of Koga. From the start, his ult was portrayed as really good, but I knew from the second I saw it, it was going to be one of the weaker ults in the game, arguably one of the top 3 worst. It takes too long to get into the ult and start moving, and the ult itself moves very slow. Any movement ability can get you out of it, and if you get healed, you'll survive because it doesn't apply caught. Half of the time, this ult is mainly only used as a survival ult. It forces others away out of fear and allows you to either get healed or move around a corner to safety. In the perfect situations, it can be used to pick up kills as well, like when the healer isn't a problem and everyone's movement abilities are down, or for solo ulting targets with no movement abilities. It's also good to use defensively, like keeping ults like Dragon Punch and King Bomb away from your teammates, or punishing them for ulting your teammates. Outside of that though, it doesn't really pick up many kills, unless the enemy has low awareness and slow reaction time. The ultimate charge rate is also very, very low. It takes a while for it to come up even if you're pumping out damage. Also, get this, in the last half second of the ult, you can be attacked when you're not even visible yet and when you can't move. So if you don't kill or get away from everyone around you, your ult makes you a free kill. As for his claws, well, many people think it's OP because of its damage, but fail to realize that the claws are only really useful for finishing off a target when you're out of ammo, or for taking a 1v1 with a lone target. When you pull out your claws as Koga, you're a sitting duck for the most part. Your only real escape is Skewer, and not only does it use all of your energy, so if you mess up, you're stuck out in the open like a sitting duck, but it's also buggy, so it can mess itself up and keep you from getting somewhere safe, which is a big reason why Blood Reaper is his worst talent, because it revolves around Skewer. If you don't use your claws at the right time, you can easily be focused down because of how vulnerable they make you. His claws do a lot of damage, making it high reward, but it's also very high risk. You can only get away with running around with your claws out if your enemy, again, has low awareness and slow reaction time. This is why Dragon Fangs is such a bad talent, because not only is it based around the claws, but it also takes your health at the same time. And yes, you can build lifesteal, but caught is so common that you're still running around in a vulnerable state while losing your health. Basically what I'm saying is Koga is like any other flank in this regard. He's really only looked at as overpowered by lower tier players, since in lower tiers players lack the aim, awareness, and knowledge needed to deal with him. So Kogas don't get punished for their mistakes like in higher tiers. In my near 200 Koga games, I've faced plenty of players like this, and they'll often complain to me after the game that Koga is OP when they sort of just let me run around doing whatever I wanted and free firing on them. However, when I'm faced with players I recognize as good players, that doesn't happen, and I'm forced to play Koga a lot smarter. Now, let's talk about his skill requirement. To play this character well takes a good blend of mental and mechanical skill. He has no cooldowns for any of his abilities. Instead, he has a resource system, and this is what's mainly responsible for his wide skill gap. If you have the energy, you can use his abilities at any time you please, in any way you please. He has a large kit that even has 2 different stances that offer different weapons and abilities. You have to manage all of this with 3 bars of energy, with most abilities taking 1 bar per cast. You have to be able to read a situation and decide the best course of action while being efficient with the resources you have. This requires a smart and experienced mind to do. People don't just pick up Koga and know what fights to take and how to use their abilities while they take them. Like for example, many don't know to time their dashes with Shaolin's arrows. You can fire at Shaolin during the 1.5 second draw time, dash as he fires so you take no damage, and do that over and over again until he's dead. Many of you know now, but how many will have the skill to actively pull it off? See what I mean? That's only one example out of many too. Then there's of course his mechanical skill requirement. The claws have a pretty forgiving hitbox, not quite as forgiving as Zin's projectiles, but more like Cassie's and Shaolin's. Again, you're not using these often though because of how vulnerable they make you, you're mainly using your SMGs. And they have the standard small hit scan hitbox like Androxus. Except since they're rapid fire weapons, they have a pretty wide spread on them that you need good tracking to compensate for. Now even with good tracking, the spread can still make you miss on thinner characters. However, on wider, more circular characters, you can easily hit every bullet with good tracking. Characters like BK, Grover, and many of the tanks, especially Barrack and Makoa, since they're round with big crit hitboxes. Now, this leads me to one of his other 2 talents, and that's Master of Arms, which promotes good tracking even more. Every bullet you land isn't consumed, so you can artificially lengthen your clip by being accurate. Again, on the thinner characters, the spread will still make you miss, so you won't have an infinite clip on them a lot of the time, but on the rounder and wider characters you will. Koga is really good at punishing big tanks who are in bad spots. Makoa, for example, again has that big round hitbox and a big head. If you can get him in a spot where he's hookless and can't get quick help from his team, you can probably 1v1 him, as with many of the tanks, but it mainly depends on them being in a bad situation. I've seen many tanks complain that Master of Arms is overpowered because Koga can spray into them infinitely, and at first I thought so too, but I later found that many of the tanks that complain about that barely even fight back or are put into bad situations when it happens. Like with Khan, you can shout for the damage amp and start firing away at Koga. He's not going to be able to melt you before you kill him unless you miss a lot. And if he dashes, you can commanders grab him as he comes out of it for that 600 damage burst on him. Fernando is another good example. I often see Fernandos wasting their fireballs against Koga. When going into a fight with Koga, initiate the fight with a fireball, then flamethrower him until he uses a dash, then fireball him as he comes out of that dash. It's not a very quick burst of movement and doesn't go very far, so it's easy to hit him as he comes out of it, and repeat that until he's dead. Don't be that Fernando that fireballs before he dashes so he can dash through it. Without your fireballs, you're not going to be able to beat him. Another thing is barriers and how Koga can easily fire into them infinitely because, let's face it, there's no possible way you can miss a barrier. And yes, Master of Arms does work on barriers, deployables, and damage immune targets. So basically what I see with this is tanks like Khan or Fernando holding up their barrier at Koga until he eventually breaks them. Again, if you're doing that, you're not really fighting back, you're just sort of giving your barrier to him. When it comes to using your barrier against Koga, do it when you need to be healed. Kogas don't really often run Wrecker, so it'll take them a bit to break the barrier. It's plenty of time for you to get the COD off of you, get healed, and resume attacking him. Now, about when to use Master of Arms. It is overall the strongest of his talents, so you're gonna end up using it more often than not, especially since double tank is part of the meta and he excels at pumping DPS into tanks, by flank class standards at least. Like I said before though, against thinner targets, you're still going to be missing even with good tracking. So in solo tank comps, which often have Inara as their tank, you may find that Master of Arms isn't the best move. Inara is the thinnest tank, and I'm not saying it's easy to miss her or anything, but Mother's Grace does offer her damage reduction, and she can cripple you. You can use agility to counteract her 50% slow with your 50% bonus speed and walk out of it, but still. What I'm saying is Inara doesn't get punished by Koga as much as some of the other tanks do. Let's say Inara is with Leon, Andro, Damba, and Cassie, for example. The whole team is on the thinner side, so in that case you may want to go with Adrenaline Junkie, which is also a good and viable talent, just second to Master of Arms. Also, let's say it's a 2-tank setup with Inara and Terminus and then Squishies. Inara and Terminus are both annoying for Koga. Again, because of the DR from Inara, and with Terminus it's because of his power siphon, since you can't break it and it can be easily used to block your Master of Arms spam. You can spam into the siphon infinitely, but if you do, you're giving him a lot of Calamity Blasts to blow your health away with. So you would probably want to use Adrenaline Junkie in this case too. Now I am talking about casual since you can't see what the enemy is picking in it. In ranked, I just wouldn't pick him against comps like this, because when you do run him in ranked, you're probably going to want to be using Master of Arms, since your SMG damage potential is way better than your claws, so you'll obviously want a talent that improves upon them. Also, the thing with Adrenaline Junkie is you're often dashing more than you're fighting. Again, the dash is pretty easy to track and hit the Koga as he comes out of it. So when it comes to building around the talents, I have a few builds to show you. For Master of Arms, you want something like this. I got this from Rock Monkey. It focuses on Wind's Embrace and Trigger Happy. These two have very good synergy with Master of Arms. With Master of Arms, you're firing a lot, so you're getting the 50% bonus healing a lot. You're also going to be in agility constantly, so you'll be buffing up Wind's Embrace with Trigger Happy. Even if you're hit with COT 3, you'll only be cotted for 40% while firing because of the 50% bonus healing, so you'll only be hit with slightly above COT 1. Now for Adrenaline Junkie, something like this works pretty well. You're not going to have Master of Arms obviously, so ammo on your dash is pretty important. Healing on your dash is important as well, and I have some Wind's Embrace in there too, because if you use dash while firing, it does buff up the dash heal. Something to prove is a staple with Junkie because you're gonna have near constant energy between weapon hits and getting low. In my opinion, the lowest I'd run it at on a Junkie build is at 3, because 30% is gonna get you 1 full bar, any lower and it won't unless you have a bit of energy already. With Master of Arms, it was used as a filler because Koga doesn't really have a lot of good filler cards. Also, as you can see, max health at 2 is something you want to have on really any Koga build. He does have a lot of sustain, but 1900 health is still a bit too low regardless, so you want to have the 2000 total health. So something I haven't talked a lot about yet is his mobility. He is the first high mobility character we've gotten in a long time. He has 3 mobility methods. Agility gives bonus speed, the dash gives you a burst of movement, and wall climbing gives you vertical mobility. This is another thing that makes him such a skill-reliant character. Look at Eevee, a lot of mobility and it takes a lot of skill to properly use that mobility. Koga is in the same boat. The more creative you are with how you use your mobility, the better you're going to be. One thing I don't see a lot of Kogas do when they're getting chased is go around a corner and then climb up a wall. When the enemy looks around the corner for you, they're going to be looking at ground level most likely, and you're not going to be in their immediate line of sight. This gives you an opening. If you have enough health, you can drop down and attack them, or if you're low, you can possibly get high enough to give your healer line of sight on you, so they can heal you and then you can drop down for an attack. Or if your healer doesn't have line of sight of you, you can climb up and dash off to a higher level to escape, since most characters don't have vertical mobility to follow you, or depending on the map you can dash over some kind of wall and escape that way. Knowing where you can and can't wall climb is important too, cause a lot of the walls in the game look climbable but aren't, and hopefully that's something they'll fix. The wall climb itself can also be buggy even on walls it's supposed to easily work on, so hopefully they fix that too. Now, I've talked about agility a bit with Master of Arms, but basically it's good to give you more strafe speed and more movement over a longer period of time. Like, you'll get further with 1 agility than you would with 1 dash. The current situation is really what dictates which one you'll use. Agility is also good because it makes it harder to track while strafing and jumping. It also makes it a bit harder for you to track others while you're strafing and jumping, but again, good enough tracking compensates for this anyway. The dash, while of course being good for getting that burst of movement, is really good for another reason. It's a cleanse. It can cleanse off soft CC, like slows, not hard CC like stuns, and it can also cleanse damage over time, reveals, and cauterize. Now I want to point out that the middle of the dash is when the cleanse happens. Like for example, if you have the heal on dash card and you dash while being cauterized, the heal will be cauted, and then the caught will be cleansed. Because of how the dash works, I've found that Furia plus Koga is a pretty insane combo, and here's why. Furia has an instant burst heal. Click and they're healed. If Furia can hit you with a heal mid-dash, you're full health for free. No way to cauterize it. I duo with a Furia main a lot, and sometimes she'll hit me with a heal multiple dashes in a row as long as I stay in her line of sight. The enemy either has to burst me down or hard CC me to stop me when that happens. No other healer really does that with Koga, at least not a full heal. Pip can, but it's not instant. He has to predict the dash if he tosses a potion from far away, and more likely than not, that's not gonna happen. With Furia, it's a lot easier. All you need to do is time and click. Now that I've gone over pretty much every aspect of Koga, what makes him strong, what makes him weak, let's talk about where his place in the meta is so you know once ranked comes around. If you are playing Koga against good players that know how to deal with him, you're gonna need to be skilled with him to make him work. Like all flanks, he suffers against high burst, and there's not a lot of straight up 1v1s he can win against the damage class unless he has some kind of advantage going into it. Knowing what advantage you need before taking a fight is important. His sustain, mobility, and DPS can make him very annoying, stally, and punishing for tanks. When I size him up against the other flanks, he definitely stands out and has his own place, since he can survive quite a while and he can bust tanks. But he generally isn't really above the other flanks power-wise. He has most of their weaknesses and can be punished easily. Even if you're a really good Koga, you can still struggle because of the current meta we're in. To put it into perspective, Rock Monkey, one of the best DPS players in the game, often talks about how much of a struggle Koga can really be. So if one of the best DPS players in the game can struggle on Koga against players that know what they're doing, how can Koga be OP? If the high burst combo characters ever get the adjustments they need, then I'd love to see how much better Koga and really all flanks get. Until then though, Koga needs a few things. Improvements to his ultimate pre-fire and post-fire speed, keeping him invincible until he's completely out of his ult, a boost to his ult charge rate, and bug fixes. His wall climbing not working, his dash going off and cancelling instantly, dashing and still dying despite using the energy for it, and Skewer's random teleportation and hitbox desync. But really, to wrap it all up, he's solid and a good pick in the right situations. He isn't a must pick, must ban by any means though. I haven't really seen him get picked and ranked a whole lot so far. One, because again, he isn't all that fantastic, and two, he takes a lot of skill and there aren't very many good Kogas out there yet. Now I do want to talk about console as well, because on console it is apparently very different and Koga is very strong. Due to the way console's aim functionality works, you can't really turn fast enough to properly react to Koga or track him because he can be so fast. Now this absolutely does not mean nerf Koga just for console. They just killed Moji on PC for console and they don't need to ruin another character for PC over this. Something does need to be done though. I don't want you guys to be left out to die, but not nerfing Koga. Instead, they need to fix the aim functionality so you guys can turn fast enough to react to Koga and track him properly. They need to give you guys the tools needed to deal with these fast flanks instead of gutting them. They could balance the systems separately, but obviously they don't want to for whatever reason. As long as the aim functionality is solid, there doesn't need to be that much different balancing done anyway. I mean, look at Overwatch. Only a handful of things are balanced differently because they gave console players the tools required to aim properly. Also, thank you to console players that helped clarify why Koga was overperforming on console. I figured it was the same case as Moji, but I wanted to be positive before I completed this video. Anyway, that's it for this video. Sorry to keep you guys waiting for so long. But yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. I want to thank you all for watching. I very much appreciate it, and I'm gonna see you guys later. Bye.